Weirdness is afoot. And rightly so really, because as we've explained over 3 previous parts of this top 5 scary series, weirdness and horror cinema often go hand in hand. It goes without saying that the vast majority of the more, shall we say, outlandish concepts in horror cinema, be it Toxic Avengers, trash on the street, or naked lunches filled with bioorganic typewriters, the best of the best have to walk a fine line for them to truly earn the title of weird. Now yes, most of these movies can be hilarious and entertaining, but to truly earn the title of weird, this is the face that we're looking for. Yeah. Hello horror fans, what's going on? And once again welcome back to the Scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. As per usual, I'll be your horror host Jack Finch, as today we curiously take a look at the top 5 weirdest horror movies of all time, part 4. Roll the clip.
Oh my god. He's called Mugwump.
And don't leave out any of the tasty details.
Yeah, exactly, that's the kind of stuff we're looking for. But for the curious amongst you, that clip was of course from David Cronenberg's mind-bending 1991 hidden gem, Naked Lunch, based upon the William S. Burroughs novel of the same name. And if you didn't know, that movie managed to clinch the top spot in part 3 of this list. And on that note, now it's probably high time to check the other parts of this series out if you haven't done so already. Also, it's an awesome movie, and any excuse to show it really, so on with the show. Kicking off at number 5, The Stuff, 1985. Oh no, poor Charlie. But also, he's obviously not alright, so stop asking. His neck just exploded. The thing is, this movie is kind of difficult to place, and that's perhaps why I've held off a little bit to include it within this particular realm of horror weirdness. You see, visually speaking, this film certainly is next level weird, primarily down to the choice of physical effects and the subsequent use of rubber models, as well as some incredibly choice acting throughout and an interesting use of characterization, i.e. weird little kids everywhere. But the point is, The Stuff is actually a highly entertaining movie throughout. Part of where it fell down, and part of the reason as to why it finds itself in the realm of weird, is that it was created with the intention of being a satirical horror comedy. However, the studio behind it, New World Pictures, wanted The Stuff to be a flat out, balls to the wall, terrifying horror monster movie. The man behind it though, Larry Cohen, he had another idea in mind, and instead we got a film that wasn't quite either a comedy or a horror. Just a weird movie, and 90 or so minutes of entertainment. Written and directed by Larry Cohen, The Stuff tells the tale of a society that becomes addicted to a strange substance that, after being discovered bubbling from the ground by a group of railroad workers, is then mass marketed to the general public in ice cream like containers. Are you following? The Stuff, marketed as a brand new life-changing substance that has no calories and is sweeter, creamier and more filling than any other foodstuff, quickly becomes a nationwide craze, and the public are hooked, addicted to this sweet and decadent stuff, I guess. But you see, that's before a young boy named Jason, played by Scott Bloom, discovers that the stuff is actually alive. It's a seemingly sentient creature that gradually takes over the human brain and mutates those that eat it into bizarre, zombie-like creatures before it eats them from the inside. Yeah, the rubber models kind of make sense now, right? In many ways, this film is a spoof that gets quite a few things wrong, which slips it into the avenue of weird horror. But that's not to say that it doesn't get a lot of things right either, because it does. Believe it or not, The Stuff is a pretty damn clever movie, and it will certainly make you pull the weird face. Yeah. Swinging in at number 4, Motel Hell, 1980. And a film that is, well, kind of similar in tone to The Stuff, kind of, but also far, far weirder than a semi-sentient goo-like substance that eats people. Yeah, because instead of the goo eating people from the inside, forget about that, why don't you start your own damn farm of humans? And whilst that may sound like spoilers, believe me, it ain't. This film doesn't pull any punches with its depth of plot. In fact, it sets its stall out from the very beginning, but the batshit crazy content that occurs in this movie, holy moly, it's weird. And also, as a side note, why is it that food and horror can't ever be done without a smirk of comedy with it? In fact, I'm pretty sure that there aren't any horror movies about food or farming or any kind of mass-produced food stuff that also aren't comedies, horror comedies. If there are, please let me know, because I think that may be the last great taboo of horror cinema. How do we make food scary? Can we? Anyway, let's talk about Motel Hell. Directed by Kevin Connor, Motel Hell tells the tale of a farmer, a man named Vincent Smith, and his younger sister Ida, who live happily on a farm with a happy little motel attached on the side, quaintly named Motel Hello. But that's before the neon O flickers off and Motel Hello becomes Motel Hell. Yeah, it's a very fitting visual metaphor because the only agriculture that Farmer Vincent employs is actually the farming of human flesh. You see, on the roadside of this happy little motel, he sets traps to catch his victims and then buries them up to their necks in his secret garden, cutting their vocal cords to prevent them from screaming. They're kept there in the ground for weeks at a time, being organically fed until they're ready for harvest, and then Farmer Vincent sells them to town as his legendary smoked meats, unbeknownst to everyone else, apart from his brother who's a sheriff, but whatever. Yeah, it takes all kinds of critters to make Farmer Vincent's fritters, as the saying goes. I don't really need to explain exactly why this film is weird and disgusting and pretty much the Texas Chainsaw Massacre rolled into one, but it's also pretty damn awesome. Sit back and enjoy the weird. Next up at number 3, Blue Sunshine, 1977.
Okay. All right, here, try it. Ow, ow.
Look what I did.
And yeah, I think that may be enough horror comedy for this list, because the other side of the weird coin is where things take a turn for the worse. Weird horror where there's nothing funny about it at all, less entertainment and more existentialism, which in this case, it goes without saying, given the fact that you're making a movie about psychedelics. And not just any kind of psychedelic, but instead a brand new mysterious strain of LSD dubbed Blue Sunshine. And when the entire premise for your horror movie is, hey, you took some weird LSD back in the 60s, but now, 10 years later, when you've got a wife and kids and a nice new apartment, you're retroactively tripping balls and turning into a serial killer. Yeah, it goes without saying that we're in for some pretty weird turn of events when that happens, but that's exactly the be all and end all of this movie. And if you're in for an offbeat and not quite right kind of trip, Blue Sunshine is exactly like that. Written and directed by Jeff Lieberman, the quirky and offbeat horror director that made a few waves in the 70s and 80s with Squirm and Just Before Dawn, Blue Sunshine opens with quite a bang. It shows a small soiree de poche of young inner city yuppies enjoying themselves of an evening when suddenly one male party member goes absolutely berserk after his false hair is ripped off, revealing his completely bald head. The mysterious psychotic man kills everyone, save for one young man, Jerry Zipkin, played by Zalman King, who is accused of the murders after the real killer is later hit by a truck in the middle of the road after spilling out of the party. Yeah, weird movies. What then transpires is a winding tale of Jerry trying to prove his innocence by tracing the source of his former friend's randomly psychotic behaviour, where it leads him to the titular psychedelic in question, Blue Sunshine, and then ensues perhaps the worst imaginable acid flashback of all time. And space. Really, start to finish, this film is a trip. I can't really say much more about it other than it's really weird. Also, the full version is on YouTube, so give it a watch and see for yourself. Coming in at number 2, Antichrist, 2009. You know what? I thought long and hard about where to place this movie, or whether to even include it on any list at all. You see, in many ways, Antichrist could certainly fit in with our top 5 scariest experimental horror movies list, but it could also firmly fit here too. Also, if you haven't checked that series out, then please do, because I think it's pretty damn good. The thing is, in an attempt to steer this list a little more towards serious horror movies of substance, I think Antichrist is perhaps the perfect example of weird done well. Yes, weird horror can be an awkward laugh out loud, purely out of sheer confusion kind of medium, but it can also be a grimace, wait, does this movie actually make sense? What the hell is happening kind of deal. Lars von Trier is perhaps the greatest example of that, and Antichrist is perhaps his finest example of weird horror. Visually speaking, Antichrist is a difficult movie to sit through. If you've seen the film, then you'll know that Lars von Trier has a knack for presenting us with incredibly challenging sequences, often slowly drawn out, forced into our view, unrelenting. Yeah, it's a bit too much for the most part, and yeah, I'd agree that there's reason enough to avoid this movie if you're so well inclined, because it's depressing, it's bleak, but what Lars von Trier does through his filmmaking is he asks questions. This question is a weird one, but it's also one that I think you'll have to make your own mind up about. And yeah, also to address the elephant in the room, Antichrist is that movie with the leg and the stone. Yeah, if you know, you know. But that's also not the worst part. Written and directed by Lars von Trier, Antichrist tells the tale of a couple, a man and woman, played by Willem Dafoe and Charlotte Gainsbourg, who, whilst making love in their apartment, their small toddler child climbs out of their crib and tragically falls to their death out of a window. After descending into a deep, unbridled depression, the couple become crippled by grief. The father, a therapist, takes it upon himself to treat his wife personally with psychotherapy, and then attempts to find out what her greatest fear is so that she can confront it in an effort to overcome the tragedy. While her fear appears appears to be the natural world, nature, the wild, the wilderness. And yeah, that's Antichrist. I'll say no more really, this film needs to be seen to even attempt to be understood. I still don't understand it. It's a weird film, certainly, and it's also one of the best. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Gothic, 1986.
Guys, conjure up your deepest, darkest fears. Call that fear to form, to life.
And a film that perhaps embodies all of the themes that have previously been laid out in this list. A film that presents its fair share of humour, its fair share of challenging themes, and its fair share of balls to the wall, bat crazy, oh my word, what kind of Frankenstein monster have we created here? And what better director to deliver all of those themes than the remarkable and truly brilliant author of all things weird, Ken Russell. And while if you've seen his 1988 British horror cult classic, The Lair of the White Worm, and you enjoyed it, then there's plenty more where that came from, because he perhaps perfected his visual form of horror weirdness 2 years before that with his 1986 film Gothic, a retelling of one particularly important vacation to Geneva, Switzerland. And whilst you may be wondering how Gothic, which on the surface is very much a period piece, manages to crank up the weirdness, then you need only ask which period of history it's focusing on. Of course, the crowning moment of Gothic literature during the summer of 1816. Written by Stephen Volk, directed by Ken Russell himself, Gothic tells the age-old tale of Lord Byron and all his friends, Claire Claremont, Mary Godwin and her future husband, Percy Shelley, who take a trip to an isolated villa in Switzerland where they meet Byron's famed physician friend, Dr. John Polidori, of course the man responsible for writing The Vampire. Now, if you know anything about this very particular instance of history, then you'll know that during their time at Villa Diodati, the creative minds that would go on to cement all aspects of horror literature for generations to come got up to some pretty weird shenanigans. But this movie takes all of those things to the next level, and of course it takes quite a few artistic liberties with the actual narrative of this movie, given the fact that, well, no one knows exactly what occurred there other than the stuff that was written down. And well, to be a fly on the wall over at Villa Diodati in 1816 would have been quite a sight to behold. Instead, we have Ken Russell's interpretation of the events, and believe me, that alone makes some pretty interesting viewing, shall we say. Now, strangely enough, I watched this whole movie back in college during an English literature class whilst we had a substitute teacher. We were studying Gothic literature, and not knowing what to cover, they seemingly saw the title of this film and thought, yeah, that would be a good fit. Yeah. That was an interesting class. Really, this film is awesome, and visually speaking, it's the definition of weird. Give it a watch. You won't be disappointed. Whether we have our horror fans, our list for the top 5 weirdest horror movies of all time, part 4. What did you guys think? Do you agree, disagree? Have any more to add to this list? Then let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below, as well as any choice picks of your own. Before we depart from today's video though, let's first take a quick look at some of your more creative comments from over the past few days. First up, Daniel Lopez says, "Hey Jack, if you could be in any horror movie ever, what would it be?" And wow, that is a great question, Daniel, and also a really difficult one. Am I trying to answer this from the am I trying to survive in the movie perspective? Actually, you know what? No. I'd want to go out in a blaze of glory. It'd be John Carpenter's The Thing. Why don't we wait here, see what happens, and then poof, I'm dead. Or am I? Who knows? Matthew Payton says, "Hey Jack, can I be you for Halloween?" Sure. Yeah, I'd be honoured. Thanks. Really? Well, on that note, unfortunately that's all we've got time for in today's video. Just stick around all the way until the end. If you were a fan of this video or just top 5 scary videos in general, then please be a dear and hit that thumbs up button, as well as that subscribe bell, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. As per usual, I've been your horror host, Jack Finch. You've been watching top 5 scary videos, and until next time, you take it easy.